Thank you. Hello, my name is Rzonca. I'm PhD from Krakow, and today I would like to signalize one scientific problem that I met during my PhD work. I was during my PhD work. I was mostly interested if I can see the traces of the development of the wheeled vehicles, of the wheeled transport into the direction that it could be used in combat. And for this purpose, I was also analyzing the weaponry in the graves, because most of the wagon parts that we know from the steppe area, which are quite numerous, they come from the actual graves. And some of those graves, of course, they contained weapons. The presence of weaponry is not, of course, the only indicator that they took in consideration here. This is important factor, but not the only one, and I think it should be analyzed in the very specific context. It can be indicator of violence, but for example, in the case of my research, I was also analyzing the technology, so it was not only in the burial rite. Burial rite is usually by definition symbolic. So the another problem that I faced was the problematic presence of weaponry in the Yamna graves. Because there's not so many, and Yamna by definition was very specific phenomenon. It was quite rapid. It rapidly spread over Europe and Asia. It was mobile, so some researchers, some authors claim it was more patriarchal, hierarchical, and the other ones were highlighting the fact that the Yamna graves weren't that rich in inventory, and they seem to be a little bit more egalitarian. And also, I would like to say there's to analyze the weaponry sets of the early Bronze Age is quite problematic itself, because I face many. There's, for example, an issue if some artifact that we found can be considered a weapon or not, if it was just a tool, because for this period, no weapon that we could consider straight as weapon was characteristic for. Many of these artifacts can be also tools, or it can be a weapon but not used against other humans, but rather for hunting. And they were not that much depicted in combat. This is an example from the Standard of War. And in the case of of the graves that I collected here, we found the daggers, arrowheads, one spearhead, and possibly one flat axe that comes from the one context that I'm not sure about. Regarding the chronology from which graves they come, I would admit they mostly come from the earlier Yamna periods. Two of the graves were I couldn't define properly because I had no data that could lead me to this. They weren't described in details, but in this case, they come mostly from early Yamna. Taraklia is something like on the edge of early and later Yamna. It's like straight in the half. And the latest grave from the set is actually Isovivnoye. This comes from Uraic area, and this is like very, very late Yamna period. So basically, regarding the daggers in the graves, I had 6 finds. This is like 10 or 9 finds in total, so they make most of the finds here. And of course, the role of the daggers is pretty problematic because they can be used as a tool, or as a weapon, or as a hunting weapon as well. This is like basically multi-tool of this era. And there's no clear indication. I mean, by this, some authors were trying to make some traceology, mostly on the Scandinavian finds. And this could lead to the point that the traces show that they were actually used in combat. Some claim that they had mostly ritualistic function. So this is very, very unclear so far. I had in the grades I collected for my PhD, I had only the metal daggers, because from the Yamna culture, especially the western part, are also known the stone daggers, but I had no dagger like this in this context. So this is the 4 daggers I could actually present because I had the pictures of them. They were published. And to quickly describe them, the first one, the dagger from Balkowski Kurgan. This is the dagger that reminds and is reminiscent of the actually Usatovo tradition of the for Usatovo culture. There was the big daggers were pretty characteristic, and this is the last reminiscent, of course, although it was much smaller, it measured around 12 centimeters. It was made from arsenic copper. And this is also a very special case because this is the only case where I had the parts of the handle, organic handle preserved, actually. The second one is Isobilnoye. This is the grave from the Uralic area, and this was the latest one. And actually, this one was this piece was also very distinct from the others because it was much bigger. It measured together like 21.5 centimeter. The third one, as you may see, is also a very specific case. I was not sure if I can even qualify this as a dagger, but it is actually classified as a dagger by other authors. For example, Ludmila Czerniak, she qualified this in her third group of the daggers. It's sometimes called also the razor. It's also sometimes described as a razor dagger, and it was mostly characteristic for early Yamna period. There's only a few finds like this, around 9 or 10. So it's pretty hard to say what this really meant. And the last one from Jaski, from Odessa region. This one was qualified by Ludmila Czerny for the later Yamna period, but on the other hand, it was made also in pretty archaic technology by the usage of the temperature around 1000 Celsius degrees, and it was work on oxidized copper. So, okay, regarding the geographical spread, these finds come mostly from the western part of this core Yamna territory, mostly from the area western from the Dnieper River, from the northwestern Pontic steppe, and one piece is, as I said, from Uralic area. Okay, so this is also quite numerous find for Yamna graves from the Yamna metals, because we have I can mention here around 130 finds, which if we compare to the number of the total Yamna graves, I think around 8,000 was like research there in Ludmila Czernyak's work, then this is still not that much. Regarding this discussion, if it could be used as a weapon or not, I mentioned already there was some traceology made, sadly not on this pieces, but the pieces that I can compare the physical traits with. Some authors also put some attention to the fact that they were too small, because most of them, except this Isobilnoye, measured around 12 centimeters together, both with this part of handle, and proper daggers that could be used in combat or for hunting should have at least around 13 or 14 centimeters. There's also a lack of the stable handle, except maybe this Balkowski case, and middle rib that also stabilized the whole construction. But on the other hand, I would like to admit they were also present on the stone stelas of the early Bronze Age together with other weapons, as we can see. There's two examples. Of course, the weapon that was the most presented here were the axes, but so some daggers we can also find on this Fedorovka. It's like presented on the top. On this picture, it's not so visible, but regarding the spearheads, I had only one case of spearhead that was found also in this like in southern Ukraine, western from the Dnieper River. It comes from Sofivka in Mykolaiv Oblast, and it's dated to the later Yamna period because it was the spearhead darthead of the catacomb type. There's around 31 finds like this, and sometimes to distinguish them from the other finds is quite problematic because they are very similar to the stone daggers actually. So sometimes the placement in the grave decides. If it was placed more close to the shoulder or the head of the deceased person, it's usually interpreted as a spearhead, but if it was somewhere around hips, it's usually interpreted as a dagger.
5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to be a little bit faster. And they were also rarely, but they were also depicted on the stone stela, so we can see this. And this is the specific spearhead that 10 centimeters long. Arrowheads is a little bit more complicated case because I had only two. One was made from bone and one was made of stone. The stone one was, I had no picture sadly, but it was the typical Yamna arrowhead with a notch on the base. Homske arrowhead made of bone is a little bit more complicated because there's a few of them, like 8 cases in one arrow set. They were mostly characteristic for this northwestern Pontic steppe, and some authors indicated that they might be some form of the arrowheads made only for training for kids, but actually they were a cause of want in at least 2 cases, so definitely they were taken pretty seriously. And regarding the context here, this is very important because I don't have arrow sets, but both of these arrows were found in between the bones, so they were also a cause of want in this case. And this is actually the case for the Yamna culture, because most of these arrowheads were found between the bones, and many of the arrowheads found in the Yamna graves, they aren't even of the Yamna type. Because of this, they can be Mierzanowice type, and they can be or catacomb type, for example. So this is this discussion about the potential taboo of the locating the weaponry in the Yamna graves. They come also from this southern Ukrainian area, one close to Dnieper, one in the Odessa region. Regarding the flatakes, I sadly cannot tell much. I have to admit, this context is quite unsure because this was the grave only with some sort of the frame, wooden frame that's sometimes also used as a base of the wagon's body. And I don't have a picture of it. Of course, this is very hard to say it was actually a weapon or tool, but this was only 2 of them were found in that were made of metal. They were mostly made of stone. And as a summary of this all data, I would like to say, of course, most of the weapons were found in the territory of Ukraine or Moldova. Today, what I see, they were found in 1/5 or 1/4 of this graves, which is pretty remarkable. But on the other hand, there's also a lack of some categories of weapons. For example, we know the axes from the Yamna culture. They were also depicted many times of the stone stelas of the early Bronze Age, but I haven't found any axe in the wagon graves, which would be very clear if I would find this, because axe is some kind of weapon that was definitely used against other humans, and not only for hunting. And there was also no weapon set. I have to admit also in this point that weapon set were mostly characteristic for the very late Yamna period, from which I almost don't have a weapon from. I also noticed during my research that most of these graves where the daggers were found, 1 piece of metal, they also contained additional inventory, for example, tools, both made of stone or bone, but also made of metal. There were some parts of the outfit found, or wooden vessels. This is quite a rare case because, on the other hand, in most of the graves with wagons and didn't contain any additional inventory. So this is worth to remark here at the point. The Yamna graves that I found the weapon in, they contain mostly the 4 with kibitkas that probably weren't used in combat. So I assume, considering all of this, that there was connection probably to the specific person, and underlying this, basically the weapons were put in the specific person grave to highlight their specific position, but it was not necessarily connected to the presence of wagon itself, which is, for a contrast, I can say, for example, that in Sintashta, Pietrovka and Ronovo graves that are sonorized, the chariot graves, there's definitely the connection between the placement of the vehicle, in this case a chariot, and the presence of weaponry there, because the weapons were mostly, they were found in most of these graves. For example, and there was like full sets. There were all types of the weaponry that we know from this time. So yes, this is the last one. Okay, so this what they said is is also very it also fits to the background that we know from the Yamna culture, because depending on the author, because it of course depends what item was considered a weapon by the specific author, and depending on the area, there was Yamna graves contained only 1 to 5% of the Yamna graves contained any kind of weaponry. So it fits. Even like in the wagon graves there was more, but as I said, it was mostly connected probably to the person deceased, not to the wagon. And for Yamna culture, I would also like to underline this, some sort of potential taboo for this culture, because during the Yamna period, for example, there was almost no mace head. I think there was only one find, even though they were known. So this is also a bit, we have to consider this while analyzing the Yamna weaponry. And as I mentioned already, there was some, even if though we don't have much weapons, we have some marks or signs of trauma. I mentioned this case of the arrowheads, but also we have the traces of the ones made by spearheads or axes. So thank you for your attention, and this is the my literature, the pictures mostly from.
Пані Justyna, witam, цікавий виклад, але хотів би звернути увагу пані на мою монографію по озброєнню. Через то фактично з аналізу озброєння культури ямової, яку презентувала пані, фактично випала така важлива категорія зброї, як кам'яні сокири молоти. І їх досить багато, і вони у мене добре систематизовані. А то важлива категорія, бо вона представлена і на стелах теж зображення. Далі наконечники списів, spearheads. То, що пані показала, то тільки катакомбовий спис. А списи ямової культури представлені, знову ж таки, в моїй монографії достатньо много. Кінжал з дагер з Молдови, я забув, як то називається, Тераклія, то не є кінжал, то бритва. Для бриття волос. А bardzo важливий і цікавий кінжал Старого Рожино на області Ніколаївської пані не звернула увагу. Bardzo перспективне дослідження, пропоную продовжувати.
Okay, maybe I would like to comment about the daggers. I mean, I'm personally very skeptical about them being used as any kind of weaponry because they're very short. I mean, in terms of personal combat, the stone hammer axe is much more effective from my point of view. But we also, in Ukrainian historiography, used to consider daggers as some kind of magical items and instruments used by mage or sorcerer. And usually daggers of these knives, they come in complex with the metal needle. So, yes. Yeah, I mean, so this some kind of instruments for ritual or maybe magic. I mean, if we will look at this objects from this perspective, I think we can get a much interesting picture. Like that, you have a traveling mage in a wagon who carries his tools, cuts herbs, cooks potions, heals people, and so on. I think it's a more interesting narrative than just a warrior.
Yes. Of course, as I said, this cannot be, the presence of the weapon itself cannot be an indicator of if we can say someone was a warrior or not. This must be taken into the much broader context. So, as I said, I also don't consider these people to be fully warriors because, I was also analyzing the function of the with vehicles in the case like kibitkas of so-called there, and in this case, I don't think it's like the presence of the weaponry doesn't indicate me nor the people were warriors or these people were or the wagons that they had were used for combat. So yes, so this is only one indicator that has to be put in very specific context of a culture, even sometimes the context of a specific grave or cemetery. Regarding this sets of the old and daggers, I know they were I know some finds from Yamna, but they were mostly characteristic for catacomb, I think, which they make like most. Actually, it's the most popular metal item from this culture. Yes, and it's interesting because it was called actually as pastoral set. It was described. Especially these owls, they were quite long, and it was supposed to be some sort of also some tool on a long wooden handle that could be used by pastorals. So yes, so in this case, of course, we need to like see all of these graves. They were already taken by some culture of this ritual position, so it's not so easy to analyze it. What's the most remarkable indicator for me is the presence of this arrowheads between the bones, the coast of one.
Yeah.
Yes, and this is like very hard to analyze for Yamnaya period because, as I said, there's not that much what we have of the weapons. That really seems that they weren't likely to put them in the graves.